On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 Tailgate Party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 99, created January 8th, 2025. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
I have been in Philadelphia today, and so I picked up a Victory Brewing Company from Philadelphia, Victory Royale IPA, a very fine IPA.
Good evening, gentlemen. Tonight I'm having Lion's Tail Brewing Bourbon Trail Stout. And what's important about this is that it's aged in Evan Williams bourbon barrels, hoping to see Evan Williams back in the lineup on Sunday.
All right, and I am back to the blender. I made an ice cream drink called an Irish Dream. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. Just the audio is available on Apple Podcast as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Well, we are back here in the same week. We finished the regular season, and now we are ready to talk the postseason. So it's going to be our wild card round preview as the Packers travel to Philadelphia. Jeff's got a little bit of playoff history between these two teams. And yes, we'll take another look at our playoff predictions, kind of what we thought things would be coming up to the end of the season, and maybe revamp them a little bit for what's going to happen over the next few weeks in the National Football League. The regular season is over. There's not that many games left, you guys. It feels like this all just started, but it was like just yesterday, right? We were playing these Philadelphia Eagles in Brazil. It was a game that I kind of hoped would bookend the Packers season. We'll have to wait and see what happens here this weekend. But Neil, you said you were in Philadelphia today. What the hell were you doing there? Are you scouting now? Are you doing some work? Are you finding safe zones in case you run into rough crowds?
I just happened to be going through Philadelphia, and I figured let's just go through some Philadelphia locations that you're certainly going to see in the video that's going to be played by the TV broadcasts. And yeah, I decided let's go stop by the Rocky Steps at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Got a photo by the Rocky statue as well. I think the biggest thing is that there's love everywhere in Philadelphia. Everywhere you see the city of brotherly love, they're ready for our quarterback to have a great game. It's love, love, love everywhere.
They are celebrating Jordan Love all over the city, aren't they?
Yes, love is everywhere in Philadelphia.
Yes, quite the irony. I'm sure that there are Philadelphia fans that are taking note of that. Packers are going to be heading there shortly, as well as Packer fans. Neil, we need to know, are you going to be one of those fans in the Linc this time around?
I'm absolutely going to be in Philadelphia. It's essentially a local game for me. I was thinking, well, the ticket prices are going to be higher than I'd pay at Lambeau, but you know what? I don't have to fly there. And so that actually makes this about the cheapest game I could possibly go to for the playoffs.
Your overall cost is down.
Indeed.
Is there even a tailgating scene that's going to happen there? What's it like when you get in and around the stadium?
In Philadelphia, there's a whole stadium complex. So the stadium for the Flyers, for the 76ers, for the Phillies, and for the Eagles are all in one complex that's right next to the highway. It's actually right next to Interstate 76 and 95. And so it's actually something that is essentially purpose-built for going to and watching sports. There's a subway station that's there. That's actually probably how I'm going to get to the game after a pregame. We'll talk about that later. But yes, there is tailgating both within the official lots, and then a lot of the official parking is actually in FDR Park, which borders the stadium district. And so that's one of the things that's sort of, I'm going to say, exciting about going to watch a game in Philadelphia is you park your vehicle in a dark park and hope that you'll survive getting there. And more importantly, your car will survive while you're there and you'll actually make it back and get out of the stadium. But it's actually a very nice area to go other than the people who are there.
And you specifically have your Reggie White jersey ready to go for Sunday.
Indeed. A couple of years ago, I bought a Reggie White jersey specifically as Philadelphia camouflage. So Philadelphia obviously has a very well-earned reputation for being rough on visiting fans. It is the worst place to go as a visiting fan as far as I've experienced. And, sometimes it's very friendly. Sometimes it's decidedly not friendly. The first time I went there actually was for the 4th and 26th game. And I wore blaze orange over my jersey going into the game, specifically because there are a lot of people in Pennsylvania who hunt. So you go to an Eagles game, there's a lot of blaze orange. But what I've realized in going to quite a few games now at the Linc is that there is a residual love for Reggie White. You will see a lot of Reggie White Eagles jerseys at the Linc on Sunday. And I've seen other people wearing Reggie White Packers jerseys. They're treated well. And so I've decided this essentially is an even better camo for going to the Linc, is wearing my Reggie White Packers jersey, because they will still have happiness about Reggie White and hopefully make them not want to kill me.
Are you planning on walking around doing some tailgating, Neil?
I'm not going to do my own tailgate. I will walk around. There is a pregame event at Milk Bar, which is the home for the Philadelphia Packers fan group. That's going to be at noon. And then I'm probably going to take SEPTA down from there. SEPTA is the subway in Philadelphia. I'm probably going to take the subway down to the game unless I'm convinced otherwise that that's a really bad idea to get in an enclosed tube with a bunch of Eagles fans, which I can see how that might be a problem as well. But yeah, I'm going to hang out with a bunch of Packers fans at Milk Bar and then head down and walk around the stadium, because I've had good interactions going around the stadium. I've really had my least friendly interactions, whether it's in the park or whether I'm actually inside the stadium, where it's actually gotten the roughest for me. So.
All right. Well, that means you're in charge of the social media interactions for Sunday for the GBC podcast as well.
I'll be sure to post as much as I can.
As long as his fingers aren't broken.
Well, now that we know how Neil is getting to the game, Jeff, you and I will be watching the game on television. It'll be Sunday afternoon, 3:30 local time for us, 4:30 out there in the wilderness where Neil is going to be. But let's talk about the game itself. Again, as we mentioned, the Packers and the Eagles met in week 1 of the season in Brazil, what was effectively supposed to be a home game for the Philadelphia Eagles. But now we are actually in Philadelphia this time. Neil, I know you want to talk about all those statistics that have happened between these two teams over the season. So why don't you start there?
First of all, there's reason to disregard some of the things that happened in that first game just because of the fact that essentially Jordan Love and most of the stars didn't play our preseason. But there were things in that first game that certainly looked encouraging. Love throwing for 260 yards. Jacob, 16 rushes for 84 yards. Wilson, 48 yards on 4 rushes. Jaden Reed had a 33-yard run too in that game. I don't know if that's replicating, but they also showed what the Eagles can do with Hurts and Barkley. And I think the big picture is essentially the same as we said before that preview of the Eagles game, that they are sort of like the old 90s Cowboys. They're a team on offense that is very much driven by their stars. They've got Hurts, who will be back from being hurt. They will have Saquon Barkley, who's even better than we thought he was going to be at the beginning of the season. And then essentially all of their offense for catching the ball is from their 2 receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They do not have a balanced receiving attack, and that was true at the beginning. That's true at the end. And I think that's one of those areas where we're going to have an advantage.
And Neil, when we look at those statistics, that game is 4 months ago. That is back in September already. A lot can happen in 4 months. It's a long football season, but Philadelphia wins that game 34-29. And then they come back and they play the Atlanta Falcons. They lose to Atlanta in week 2. They beat New Orleans and then lose at Tampa. Their bye is very early. Their bye week in week 5. That team was 2-2 going into the bye week. So they really didn't start out the season very impressive. Like I said, a 5-point win over Green Bay. And then, you lose to Atlanta at home, and then you lose at Tampa Bay as well. A win over the Saints, but, they only won that game by a few points as well. And the Saints, as we know, didn't turn out to be a very good team this year. But now, after the bye, Philadelphia has been strong ever since losing just one game a few weeks ago at Washington. Other than that, they have just totally dominated and now have a 14-3 record on the season.
Yeah, but John, who have they beaten?
Oh, yeah. Who have they beaten? They beat the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants and the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Dallas Cowboys.
Twice.
Oh, my.
Yep. Yeah, well, I guess they beat the Giants twice as well. And the Carolina Panthers. You can only play who's on the schedule, but they did split with the Commanders. That's a playoff team. They did win at Baltimore 24-19. They did beat Pittsburgh 27-13. Yes, Neil, Pittsburgh is in the playoffs, believe it or not. And at Los Angeles, they made that big road trip to Los Angeles for a Sunday night matchup and beat the Rams 37-20.
So the Packers have been criticized for the weakness of the teams that they have beaten. But, we beat the Rams, we beat Houston, we beat a bunch of weaker teams as well. But I don't see anything on their schedule that looks like they were that dominant over teams compared to our lack of dominance in our games against especially the Vikings and the Lions. I don't know. It sounds like we're getting a lot of shit for a schedule and the Eagles aren't getting shit for the exact same weak schedule.
Again, like I said, you can only play who's on the schedule. So really, we lose to Detroit twice, Minnesota twice, the season ender with Chicago, and then, like I said, that week one game, which is forever ago. And a lot of that will attribute to how the two teams treated the preseason. And we know that about Green Bay. They treat that first game of the year, save for the Chicago win last year, they treat that as the last of the preseason games. I don't know if that's a good strategy, but that's the way it worked out. Green Bay ends up with an 11-6 record on the season as well. But yeah, you're right. When you look at the season, I think you have to talk about it in the perspective of how did we look at the season going into it? When we did our preseason preview, we talked about that Houston game being a signature win, the San Francisco game being a signature win, the Miami game being a signature win. And those are games that they needed to win. And not only did they win those games, but 2 out of the 3 of them, they dominated in those games as well.
It playing in Seattle as well, a place that a lot of us were very hesitant about, a team that very easily could have made the playoffs. I mean, you can make the argument that of those teams that we beat, the Miami, the Seattle, the San Francisco, that we're playing a role as to why they are not playoff teams. And I think there's something to be said for that.
That's an excellent point, because when we were playing them, they were in playoff contention. We didn't play all these teams on the last game of the season. So it was during the course of the year. It was important. And you're right, John. They were signature games. And in those games, we rose to the occasion. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that's something we can do again. But yeah, that whole week schedule thing. And remember, these were playoff teams last year as well. But what I think is fascinating is you show me an Eagles fan that thought that Saquon Barkley was going to be anywhere near how he turned out to be this year. He's carried the team. I think those first couple weeks, they were still finding their way, but basically they just figured out, well, give the ball to Saquon and let him just run over people.
That combined with their really good offensive line. And that's something that we knew, even losing Jason Kelce, that they had a great offensive line. And yes, leaning in on a great line is a good strategy, regular season, and certainly in the playoffs.
It's certainly amazing what Saquon was able to do behind a quality offensive line with him carrying the team. I mean, Hurts has been solid, but he's been, hurt a couple times this year. It'll be interesting to see how he comes back and not having played in a while in this game, how that's going to play out. I mean, I'm assuming he will end up starting, but how is he going to be a little rusty? So I think the Packers really are going to need to key smartly on the run.
And fortunately, that's something that we've actually been really good at this year. So looking at some overall numbers between the Packers and the Eagles. So actually remarkably similar teams as far as the numbers. DVOA, 3rd for the Packers, 5th versus the Eagles. Yes, the Packers are still ahead of the Eagles in DVOA on the season. Offense, 4th for us versus 13th for the Eagles. Special teams, 15th and 14th. Biggest difference on defense, we're 7th, but they are 1st in DVOA on defense. And their defense is something that has been really strong all year. And the biggest number for that is they're only allowing 278 yards per game on defense. Second is 311. So they have been an absolutely dominant defense as far as number of yards allowed per game.
Based on that, we're probably looking at, maybe a special teams play to perhaps change fortunes, maybe a long punt return, kickoff return, something like that.
That's certainly something that can make a difference. But I mean, both teams are good on offense. The Packers are a good offense, right? I mean, we get focused on all of these negatives. And while we're not putting all of our parts together, but the numbers don't lie. The Packers are 5th in the NFL in yards per game on offense. And we're good in other aspects as far as that. So the Eagles, first of all, are best actually in their passing defense. They're the number 1 passing defense, only 174 yards allowed per game. But by the same token, they're actually 10th against the run. So where's your opportunity against them? But also, given that Jalen Hurts is probably going to play more conservatively than Jalen Hurts normally does, Right. That does give us the opportunity, I think, to key more on Saquon Barkley and their running game. And I'd also add that even though the Eagles have been very efficient, Jalen Hurts, despite having 60 fewer pass attempts than Jordan Love, was actually sacked 35 times on the season. You combine that with the fact that he rushed 150 times for 630 yards, got 14 rushing touchdowns. I don't think he's running anywhere near as much in the postseason, or at least this week, because of those lingering concerns about the concussion. Essentially, Jalen Hurts' injury is taking away a significant portion of his game. And yes, this Eagles team is certainly qualified enough and confident enough to overcome that, but you are taking away a part of their offense. And I think that is something that can be significant.
Neil, to piggyback on that, one of the Eagles' signature plays, the tush push, that might be taken out of play because that exposes Jalen Hurts to contact, close contact and things like that with the defensive lineman. So with the lingering potential effects, do you think that takes the tush push kind of off the table? Do you think that they'll even try to run that this game?
I mean, the tush push is not a high-speed injury, so I'm less happy about that play potentially disappearing. But it's, again, he had 630 yards rushing on the season. I think that's the number that is really going to disappear.
And taking a look at how the season ended for the Eagles, you really can't look at you can look at trends. I mean, in the last 3 games, they're over 300 yards in total offense. Defense is kind of all around the board. The Washington game is the anomaly there because that's the game that Jalen Hurts gets knocked out of. Washington wins the game 36-33. They put up 338 yards of offense. They give up 368 yards. And then after that, you've got Dallas and New York to end the season. When we look back at some playoff teams that they played against Pittsburgh, they put up 400 yards of offense. They only gave up 163 yards on the defensive side. They win that game 27-13. Their game against Baltimore was really interesting because they only have 252 yards of offense, but they win that game 24-19. So there's not really anything that I can look at here that I can say there are trends, or if this happens, this is how Philadelphia is going to play. I think a lot of it just relies on them being the healthiest team right now. It's unreal how, with Jalen Hurts coming back, this is a strong, healthy team ready to make the push in the postseason.
They're strong, and they're strong specifically in what their biggest strength is on offense. So going back to some numbers, they are second in the NFL at 179 rushing yards per game. The Packers are fifth, but only 147. They are actually 29th in passing yards per game. So they have been relying on that run all year. And so, yeah, the downside to saying, well, they aren't going to be able to allow Hurts to push the ball forward as much as, well, they haven't actually relied on that all year really at all anyway. So they aren't really having to do anything differently with Hurts perhaps playing a bit more conservatively.
So like I said before, just give the ball to Barkley and he will wear you down. And that's going to be really interesting to see if our defensive line and our cornerbacks are going to be able to tackle him.
Well, if it's coming to our cornerbacks, that's where it's going to be a problem, first of all. I will say in a positive sense, the Packers defense is 6th in the NFL in yards allowed per game. And that's actually better in the run than the pass. We're 7th at allowing only 99 rushing yards per game, 13th in passing. So I think that the strength of our defense is something that maybe isn't what we thought it was going to be going into the season, but the numbers bear out the fact that we are better against the run than we are against the pass. And I think the return of Quay Walker is going to help that as well.
I think definitely you got to look at, for this Packer defense, I think definitely looking at keying on the run is probably the way you have to control a game. Control the line of scrimmage and make sure you stop the run. I think Saquon Barkley, yes, is definitely the most dangerous weapon on that offense. They do have a good passing game, but when you look at how Green Bay played Chicago with a mobile quarterback, did they try to get at Caleb Williams or did they try to contain him? They played a lot of contain there, and I fear that they'll do the same thing with Jalen Hurts. They'll contain, give him a little bit of time to throw. But again, like I said, I really expect Barkley to get the bulk of the plays, as far as rushing goes. Just control the line of scrimmage and stop the run, and I think Green Bay's got a chance.
How do you think our offense approaches the Philly defense? So we've got a premier running back as well.
See, that's been the thing, right? How excited have we been that this team is committed to the run? And when we look at a game where Malik Willis comes in, how the game plan changes, how it changes to a run-first offense. And the question is, well, why can't we game plan run first with Jordan Love out there? And I would like to see the offensive line working as road graders and just wearing down the defense. And we know that Josh Jacobs has the mindset to just run guys over.
Yes.
Let's run them over and stick to the ground game as much as we can.
I want to see a whole lot less Jeff sweeps.
Yes.
But I want to see a whole lot more tight ends. Of course I do. But
you would like a 2 tight end set, I bet, Jeff.
Yes. We have 2 high draft pick tight ends. They're both finally healthy.
Yeah.
This should be just a dominant passing attack with these 2 tight ends, because both of them are excellent pass catchers. And especially now with Tucker Kraft's kind of mentality, just to run somebody's ass over, and that one defensive back is not going to bring him down. Feed them the ball, get them the ball, run play action passes, get the running game going, but get the ball to the tight ends, put the ball in their hands, and let them dominate.
Jeff, I think you hit the key there, though. John said that we put Malik Willis in, we go to this run-heavy offense, and it's been effective. Well, guess what? We lost to the Bears, so you can make an argument that when it's clearly, predictably a run-first offense, it's not actually that effective. And yes, we need to have deception constantly on offense, so they don't know if we were going to run or we're going to pass. We can't do 6 running plays in a row to the same back. We've got to have a mixture of those plays to make sure that they never know what is going to hit them, and especially do some of the things that Aaron Rodgers was particularly good at, looking at what's at the line of scrimmage and calling into whatever the defense is saying that we should be doing on a given play.
Yes, because Love has that capability. He has the experience, and he's got the green light to do so. So he needs to make the call at the play around with his receivers, get the calls, get creative. If not now, when? This is the time. Let's see the motion. Let's see some trickeration. Let's just see something that's not super vanilla and, like you said, running 3-4 times in a row predictably. Let's confuse the defense, because the skill is there. As long as the execution is there, that's kind of a big caveat sometimes, but that's going to be the key to success.
Well, and you're going to have a strong running game to set up the pass, getting into play action. We look at the Philadelphia defense with C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship back there in the defensive backfield. These are 2 guys that kind of dominate that backfield. As safeties, can they get sucked in on a play action run play? Great. That would be awesome. This is also going to be the game that Packer fans are really going to look at and say, hey, Cooper DeJean is the guy we wanted. How is Cooper DeJean going to play in this game? What kind of factor is he going to have in the Packer passing game? Also, we get to see Zach Bond, Wisconsin guy. I think he's doubtful, but I believe he may have a chance to get into this game as well. I think Badger fans would like to see him. He had 3.5 sacks and an interception on the season. So I think there are players that Packer fans are going to key on in this game to say we need to work around them or we need to scheme for them. But let's just see the Packer offense be the juggernaut that it can be.
I don't really care about keying on the players that the Packers fans want to key on. I want to key on the players that have actually been most effective. So Darius Slay had 13 passes defensed on the year. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, 12. Quinion Mitchell, 12. They've got a really good defensive backfield. That is why they were first in the NFL in the fewest passing yards allowed per game. We're going to need to have things that are going to draw them in, that are going to be able to take advantage of that. And yes, getting the ball to all sorts of different players is going to be central. That whoever is open, throw that ball to them. But that, again, has been a strength of the Packers all year. In contrast to the Eagles, who had A.J. Brown over 1,000 yards and Devontae Smith at over 800 yards, essentially being all of their pass receiving offense, some from Dallas Goedert as well. The Packers really did throw the ball around. The full year statistics bear that out. Reed, 857 yards. Kraft, 707 yards. Watson, 620 yards. Obviously, that's going to be taken up by other players. Dobbs, 601. Wicks, 415. Jacobs, Heath, and Melton obviously are going to have to step up. And yes, Luke Musgrave only had 45 receiving yards on the season. We're certainly expecting a lot more than that, possibly just on Sunday alone, if we're going to have an effective game plan.
That's one of the keys. Historically, you look back at playoff wins, it's players that haven't really contributed during the season having sort of the game of the season. It's the end of the season. Everybody has different injuries and it is banged up. So who's fresh? Who can come out and really make a difference that the other team hasn't schemed for or hasn't really seen that much of film or whatever. We have the two tight end. I'll go back to that. Musgrave said 45 yards. He was hurt most of the year. Get him involved and get Kraft involved. And then that opens so many other possibilities up. The running game and our receivers, even though Christian Watson is obviously hurt, won't be in this game. This could be sort of one of those games where they're playing for him as well. And to say, all right, we want him, we miss him, because based on what I've read, that's a really tight receiver room. And I think everybody feels bad. Certainly Packer fans feel terrible for that injury as well. So playing for him and having success, that's going to be a really big key here.
And then switching to the defensive side, we've seen Edgerrin Cooper come on in the second half of the season. Evan Williams was the guy who was really coming on and starring in the first half of the season to the middle of the season. He's been out for several weeks now. Seeing Cooper, seeing Williams, add in Bullard, see Stokes rested and ready to go after he had a resurgence in the second half of the season. Brenton Cox is going to be back in this game. We've got a lot of players that could come together to make for a very effective Packers game plan on defense.
And we're excited for what will be the fourth postseason matchup between the Packers and the Eagles this weekend in Philadelphia. But Jeff, what about those three previous matchups between these two teams?
A lot of history here, John. The Packers and Eagles have faced each other in the postseason 3 times. All have been memorable. All have been on the road as well. The first matchup was December 26, 1960, when the Packers and the Eagles played for the 1960 NFL Championship at Philadelphia's Franklin Field. The Eagles won a close game by a score of 17-13. This would be the last championship game that Lombardi would ever lose as the Packers ascended to a team of greatness in the 1960s. In fact, the next time the Packers played the Eagles on November 11th, 1962, albeit not a playoff game, the Packers won 49-0, compiling a club record 628 yards to 54 for the Eagles. After scoring at home, that's a difference of 574 yards. Eagles had 3 first downs. Packers had 37.
2 notes here. First, Franklin Field is a really beautiful classic stadium. It is still used on the University of Pennsylvania campus. They host a lot of track events, especially, but you think about an old type of stadium. It's a beautiful place for a football game. And just a reminder about that 1960 NFL championship game. The Packers outgained the Eagles 401 yards to 196. So they didn't have to wait until that following meeting to dominate the Eagles. It's just that those Lombardi Packers didn't have all those pieces come together, but 223 rushing yards to 99 for the Eagles. That's the sort of performance that would be lovely to see on Sunday.
Absolutely, Neil. So the second matchup was played on January 11th, 2004 at the Linc in Philadelphia.
I was there.
The Packers, still buzzing from their wild card walk-off overtime victory over Seattle the previous week, fell to the Eagles 20-17 in overtime in this divisional game. The Packers jumped out to a 14-0 lead and led 17-14 late in the fourth quarter. With 1:12 left and just one timeout, the Eagles faced a 4th and 26 from deep in their territory. The Packers, stop me if this one sounds familiar, chose to rush only 4 and dropped into a soft zone coverage. Donovan McNabb had time to throw and found Freddie Mitchell right down the middle of the field for an improbable first down, keeping the drive alive. The Eagles went on to kick a field goal to tie the game at 17 and sent it into overtime. In overtime, Brett Favre was intercepted on the Packers' first offensive series, and after a short drive, the Eagles kicked the game-winning field goal, and thus was born the 4th and 26 game.
That was a game that just never, ever, ever should have gotten close. It was so much fun being at the Linc that day. I was around a number of the Packers families. Aaron Campman's family was right in front of me. They were all very lovely people. And we started out in an absolutely dominant fashion. 2 Favre to Ferguson touchdowns in that first quarter alone. And then we started to get hyper conservative. It was the worst of Mike Sherman as far as that is concerned. And specifically in that game, We had a 4th and 1 at the Philadelphia 1. We were stopped that. At least we went for it on the Philadelphia 1. But then after that, they just basically decided, no, we're not going to take any chances. And the number of failed opportunities. So again, 4th and 1 at the Philadelphia 1. We got to the Philadelphia 38. We actually passed. Favre was sacked and punted after we got to the Philadelphia 38. We got to the Philadelphia 36, had an incompletion on 3rd and 3 and punted from the Philadelphia 36. We got to the Philadelphia 3 when it was looking like the Eagles were going to come back and then kicked a field goal from there. And then we got to a 4th and 1 at the Philadelphia 41 and then punted from the Philadelphia 41, taking a delay of game, moving us back. But we got to the Philadelphia 41. That is 5 times that we got into the edge or deep into Philadelphia territory and got a grand total of 3 points from that. That was a fun game to watch early because of the offense, but our defense was really the star. We had 8 sacks of Donovan McNabb in that game. There's no way we should have lost the 4th and 26 game. Fuck off, Mike Sherman.
Jeff, I don't know who stuck a quarter at him, but he just had a big dish of beef Swellington. I think we need to move on because I'm full.
Well, the news gets better. The history gets better, fortunately. So the third matchup between these two teams was also played at the Linc on January 9th, 2011. It was a wild card matchup between the 6th-seeded Packers and the 3rd-seeded Eagles, winners of the NFC East. Kind of a similar situation here. Aaron Rodgers threw for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns, but it was the performance of James Starks, who rushed for 123 yards, more than his entire regular season total, that helped the Packer offense. The Packers never trailed in this game. They jumped out also to a 14-0 lead and led 14-3 at halftime. Packers scored another TD in the third quarter. Now, thanks to 2 missed Eagle field goals and a penalty on a 2-point conversion, the Packers led 21-16 late in the fourth quarter. With the Eagles driving for the go-ahead touchdown, the dagger was Tramon motherfucking Williams.
He fucks mothers.
Intercepting Michael Vick in the end zone with 33 seconds left. This victory, of course, was the first of 3 road wins for the Packers on their way to winning Super Bowl 45. How about Tramon Williams?
Yeah, Super Bowl doesn't happen without Williams on that play. And I think overall in that game, it's getting back at Michael Vick for that snow game in Green Bay many years prior when he was at Atlanta as well. So a lot of things happen in that game. But Philadelphia at the moment leads the postseason series 2-1.
So this was also a game that emphasized the importance of running. So you mentioned Rodgers with the 3 touchdowns, but he actually only had 180 passing yards, and many of those passing yards and one of those passing touchdowns were to running backs. Brandon Jackson had a receiving touchdown, 27 yards. John Kuhn had 33 receiving yards in that game. You mentioned Stark as well, and our wide receivers essentially had very little receiving yardage in that game. It was not the breakout game for our wide receivers. It was for our running backs. And in contrast, Andy Reid did what Andy Reid used to be known for in the playoffs, in that he forgot to run the ball. Michael Vick with 36 passes. The running backs for Philadelphia, only 13 rushes for the running backs for 52 yards. Thank you, Andy Reid.
And again, like I just said, so Philadelphia has won 2 postseason games. Green Bay has won 1 of them. This is the 4th matchup between those teams. Guys, it's time to predict this one as the Packers go into Philadelphia this weekend for the first round matchup, 2 versus 7. Jeff, who do you like this weekend?
Well, I like that it's going to be 2-2 after this weekend.
Ooh.
Packers, for all their foibles in these last couple weeks, let's hope there's been a learning process. We get some players back from injury. There's certainly motivation of Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love falling short last year. This is the start to the Super Bowl run. Not ideal going into Philly, hostile environment, but Philly is not the perfect team either. They're beatable, as we've talked about. I'm picking the Packers.
Jeff, I'm going the same direction you are. I think the players that we're getting back are very important players. I think the motivation of McKinney and Jacobs and those other teammates. But I think there is a general feeling on this team that they know how to play well and they haven't done it consistently. But the numbers bear it out. They're third in the NFL in DVOA. This is a team that has performed well throughout the entire season. They played well against a lot of different teams and a lot of different styles. And talking to some Eagles fans today, one of the concerns of Eagles fans is, quote, the Eagles don't score in the first quarter and that it takes a while for the Eagles to get started in the game. Guess what? This sounds like a perfect situation like we had in 2003 in the 4th and 26 game, start out hot. And it sounds like a situation that we had in 2010. We have to start hot like we did against Dallas last year. If we go start, we are unpredictable on offense. We do it by the run. We do it by the passing. Then we've got a situation that we can take a lead and we can make this Eagles team feel some pressure. Guess what happens if there's pressure? They feel that they've got to throw the ball more. We put Jalen Hurts in a situation where he might not be entirely comfortable after being out for essentially a month of the season. I think this is a Packers victory. I think it's going to be a very tight game. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I think no matter what, the Packers are going to keep this game close. I think that these teams are actually matched up very well, and it should be an exciting day of football.
Well, this is the week where we get to find out if my conspiracy theory has been correct. We'll see how this Packer team comes out. But I agree with you, Neil. I think that the Packers will play unpredictably this weekend because they have not been putting things on tape the last few weeks. And the things that they do put on tape, like Jordan Love going to receiver position, is a bullshit move that isn't going to go anywhere. It's something to get Philadelphia to think about something that doesn't need to be thought about. But Green Bay is going to come out probably, ideally, with some looks that we have not seen on offense, some plays we have not seen, and the defense is going to have to strategize to play a hell of a lot better than just rushing 3 or 4. And if I'm right, and it happens, which I think it will, then Green Bay wins this game in the first round against Philadelphia, just like last year, coming out strong, playing strong early, and holding on to that lead. So all three of us have Green Bay in the first round. Let's stay in the NFC here. Let's go ahead and finish up the NFC week. So if you like Green Bay beating Philadelphia, I'll go through mine, and then I'll let you guys go through your NFC. I am going to take Washington winning on the road in Tampa Bay, just because I don't want to say anything even differently. The Los Angeles Rams will make short work of the Minnesota Vikings. Their sham season is going to come to an end this weekend as well. That's going to put Washington in Los Angeles, where I believe the Commanders will take care of the Rams. Green Bay at Detroit. You can't beat a team 3 times in a season. I'll take Green Bay over Detroit because that will lead to a Packers at Washington NFC Championship game, and we'll get to hear all the Packer fans grumble about how that game should have been in Green Bay, and they'll complain about the last 2 games of the season. But regardless, I say Green Bay comes out with the victory, and Green Bay will be the NFC representative in the Super Bowl in New Orleans.
John, they were correct to complain about how we played the last 2 games regardless, but my predictions go basically very similarly to you. I've got one key game different. I've got Washington over Tampa Bay. I just don't think Tampa Bay has been a good team. They've been lucky to play in the South. Washington's got a young, dynamic quarterback. I'm picking Minnesota over Los Angeles because I think Los Angeles is a team that's had plenty of its sham components itself, and they don't have a very significant home field advantage. Packers over Detroit, same reasons. And then Washington over Minnesota now instead of LA, because I think Washington's got the better quarterback in the playoffs. The better quarterback tends to win. And then the Packers at Washington. That's a game that I will certainly go to if that's what happens. And then I think the Packers win in Washington because I think Washington does have weaknesses that the Packers team that is more balanced is going to be able to exploit.
Well, thankfully, I don't have groupthink. So I've got I've got different teams. Buccaneers, Commanders. I've got the Buccaneers. I'm going to get on the Baker Mayfield bandwagon here and see what Baker can do in the playoffs. Commanders, yes, they've been good. They've got a rookie quarterback. I think actually Baker Mayfield's going to outplay the rookie in this one. So I've got the Bucs. And John, similar to you, Rams, Vikings, I would like to see the Vikings season come to an end.
Jeff, we all would like to see the Viking season come to an end, but do you think that's what's actually going to happen?
Yes, I do believe so, Neil. Rams over the Vikings. So I've got a Rams Bucks matchup and a Lions Packers matchup. So, John, like you said as well, it's very difficult, if not almost impossible, for the Lions to beat the Packers 3 times in a season. I've got the Packers over the Lions, and I've got the Rams over the Bucks, just simply because the Rams on offense, they've got fantastic receivers, and they've got a Super Bowl winning quarterback, one of the few in the playoffs with good experience. I think Matthew Stafford still got a little bit left, but not enough. I've got the Packers Rams in the division championship game, with the Packers moving on to the Super Bowl.
All right. Well, at least we are consistent in our homer dumb. Preseason, midseason, postseason, we are sticking with Green Bay, tried and true all the way through. We don't care about the AFC, but let's take a look at it real quick. I'm going to go first round Chargers, Ravens, Bills. That's the 2, 3, and 5 teams winning there. That'll put Baltimore at Buffalo, Chargers at Kansas City. And I'm sticking with my prediction there. The 2 best teams meeting up in the AFC Championship game, Buffalo at Kansas City. And I'm taking Kansas City again for that Super Bowl I rematch in New Orleans, Packers, Chiefs.
John, we're starting out the same, and then I'm choosing those LA Clippers over Houston. I have no faith in them. Pittsburgh's been terrible at the end. Baltimore's an easy game, and then Buffalo over Denver. In the Kansas City Clippers game, I'm going to go with the Clippers over Kansas City because Kansas City has gotten really, really, really historically lucky in the record that they've achieved this year. They have done things that are essentially completely unsustainable. I think that Jim Harbaugh is a good coach, and so is Justin Herbert as a quarterback, and they're going to be able to exploit those things that Kansas City has shown. Baltimore at Buffalo, I think Buffalo having the home field advantage is going to make the difference. So I've got the Clippers at Buffalo for the AFC Championship, and as I predicted at the beginning of the season, I've got Buffalo being the AFC representative in the Super Bowl. It's Josh Allen's year.
All right.
Okay, so finally, I also have the Clippers over the Texans, and similar to you, I've got the Ravens over the Steelers and the Bills over the Broncos. So Patrick Mahomes has still got something. They still have a little mojo. So I've got the Chiefs over the Chargers, although I think that's going to be a really fascinating game. One factor to consider here, the Chargers, Southern California team, probably going to be cold in Kansas City, maybe not as historically cold as it was last year, but nonetheless cold. That could affect the Chargers. So I've got the Chiefs surviving that game. Ravens, Bills. This is probably the best game. This is essentially the AFC Championship. I've got the Bills coming out of this one. Again, they are going to be at home. Weather could be a factor here as well. Be more of a rushing game. Will that favor the Ravens, though? I'm not so sure. So I've got the Bills and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Again, I think it's the Bills' year. They just have this mojo. They've got it going. Bills, Packers in the Super Bowl.
All right. Well, you know what that means. It means that realistically, it's going to be the Broncos and the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl, right? That's the prediction that nobody expects. Denver and Tampa Bay in New Orleans this year. But with our predictions that we did make, so both of you have Buffalo, Green Bay. I've got Kansas City, Green Bay. Jeff, who are you taking for the Super Bowl then?
I'm going to stay homer all the way. I think the Bills are going to suffer another heartbreaking loss in New Orleans, where the Packers have had success, certainly. So I've got Packers over Bills.
Packers over Bills as well. If the Packers are in the Super Bowl, they're winning the Super Bowl this year.
All right. That's how I feel too. Packers over the Chiefs. Now, wouldn't it be fun, though, if Buffalo and Minnesota made it to the Super Bowl? Because that's 2 0-4 Super Bowls.
Somebody's got to win.
Somebody would have to win that one, right? I suppose that's another matchup that could be a possibility. But if it is Broncos, Buccaneers, I'm going to take the Denver Broncos, okay?
Do I have the ability to bet money that Minnesota is not going to win 3 games in a row? Because I would like to bet money that there's no chance that they win 3 games in a row.
I think you could do that. I'm sure someone would take that bet for you, Neil. All right, Neil, since you're the one making his way to Philadelphia this weekend, what are your final thoughts before you make that trip?
I'm looking forward to a fun day in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia fans, if nothing else, are passionate. I am looking forward to both teams playing off of the passion of those fans, but I'm looking forward to Lincoln Financial Field becoming Lambeau Field East. on Sunday. And I'm also taking inspiration from Eddie Lemberger and the Happy Schnapps combo. I'll bet Ron Jaworski's a secret Packers fans. He's not so dumb. And then also from the Happy Schnapps combo, for cripe's sake, they only won one lousy Super Bowl, but I wouldn't mind if Gritty got run over by a truck because the Eagles still suck.
Nice.
Go Pack, go.
I cannot follow that up with song. I have no song and dance here. All I have to say is with the fourth playoff game against the Eagles on the road, I'm hoping that like the 2010 season, a road victory in Philadelphia will launch this Packers team to another Super Bowl appearance and victory in Super Bowl 59 in February. Go Pack, go.
And we're done with home games, but that doesn't mean we can't continue to think about tailgating. A reminder, please vote for Scott Schwartz for the Packer Fan Hall of Fame. We'll be putting it up on our social media because that vote runs through January 31st. You can vote once per day on the Packer Fan Hall of Fame website page. All you have to do is put in your email and vote. So please keep voting for Scott. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe and leave us a comment. And you can find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That is all one word, Green Bay Chat. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Blue Sky, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. At Facebook, we are the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. And you can follow us on any and all of those social media platforms. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.